Hey people, welcome to the channel, and this is gonna be yet another one of these chill, laid-back conversation type videos. And I'd like to talk with you guys today about doing these things, doing these manual things that we're probably not all that used to, especially those of us that don't work in the field or work in construction or work in something that you basically need tools all the time because of your line of work. In my case, it's a lot of reading, researching, and yes, trying sometimes cool stuff, but it's not your line of work. You're not always working with hand tools. And yet we talk about them very often, right? I do talk about many of these things, talking about guns, firearms, knives, tools, right? All of these things. Well, every once in a while you actually have to go and use them, right? The shovel. Well, have you used it for something? I mean, even in the YouTube videos that I see people chopping with them, digging maybe a little bit, but have you actually used it for something that you needed? Something that was a specific task, labor-ish sort of thing? Not very common, not very often. So yesterday, weekend, we had to do a few things there in the around the house, right? A few things that needed to be done, and yeah, usually the typical mowing the lawn, working on stuff like that. But the wife had a little to-do list, let's call it that way. So there was a garden hose that had like a plastic structure that goes against the wall, and it was all that needed to be replaced. There was that. There was also a pine tree that was a little bit too large for the place where it was, and yeah, it had to be removed. So as anyone that does not enjoy doing things, hold on, and you have a bunch of kids, you get them to do these things. And I'm only half joking. Yes, if you have a teenage son, that's probably one's going to be mowing the lawn or doing the gardening or digging holes or doing that sort of thing, right? Your kids are the ones that are probably going to do those things. And they should. I did that as a kid. I did a lot of sanding, of painting, of changing stuff and fixing things. I did all of that as a kid, and yes, as an adult as well. But it's also the case that when you have, like in my case, I have a 6-year-old, a teenage, and an older, already an adult, right? So 3 kids. And in each stage, you are supposed to do some parenting. You are supposed to teach some things. Yes, part of that is you don't want to mow the lawn anymore yourself. So yeah, you get your kid to do it. That's fine. That's what their responsibility usually involves. They don't do all of the laundry. They don't do all of the other stuff that other members of the family have to do. So yeah, that is perfectly fine. That is your responsibility. That maybe taking out the trash or whatever chore they have. But it's also a good moment to teach valuable life lessons in terms of solving shit, fixing stuff, figuring things out. Something you've never done before, but now you have to do it. How is it that you tackle that? So something as simple as removing one of these a garden hose that had like a plastic square thing in which it was like rolled up in, right? Well, that needed to go, and it was attached to the wall with 4 screws. Now the screws are pretty simple. You just find a Phillips or a flat screwdriver, but in this case, the plasticky thing was kind of like in the way. And you could get a screwdriver in there, but it was not comfortable. It was like an angle, and it was kind of like, oh, it's kind of weird. This is not very convenient. It can be done, but still. And that's the moment in which you get your teenage son to, say, we have to get rid of that thing. Go take it out. Is it a flat screwdriver? If it's a Phillips, it's a Phillips. Oh, but that's too small. It has to be a larger one or a smaller one or whatever. Yeah, okay. Go to the toolbox. Find whatever tool it is you need. Leave everything organized after you're done, right? All of these things that we are not used to, especially the younger generations are not used to, in terms of figure things out, find a way, solve problems, get things done, get things fixed. That's something that this newer generation is even less used to than our generation, and ours was already not living with a challenges or things that even older generations dealt with on a day-to-day basis, right? That's the way it should be. You have to teach them how to figure things out. So maybe on the third attempt they find the screwdriver that works. But this is where it gets to a point where if I do it myself, maybe I do it faster, quicker. If I'm doing parenting instead, I have to check out a few things. I have to explain what has to be done. I have to make sure no one gets hurt. I have to maybe help them along the way. So it is often the case that it's just more convenient to just go do things yourself. It's more convenient, but that's not the right thing to do. The right thing is to have the patience to teach your kids how to do these things, right? And maybe if that's not your kids, if you don't have kids, but figuring things out on their own or on your own, whatever the case may be. If you do that enough times, they will learn to think for themselves. They will learn to figure things out. So this plastic thing that was on the way, I realized it was a simple thing of pulling from one little a gray plastic, piece that it had on top. When you pull it out, it had like a long element on the center that it was like a large plastic pin. Once you pull that out, the entire thing came loose, right? But this is the kind of thing that a kid without patience will not figure out. They try to push their way through, muscle their way through the problem. These are huge, valuable lessons, right? But they have to go through it. They have to try to get the damn thing on the side, and it just, right? And then they start learning to think outside the box, trying to figure things out instead of just pushing and muscling through. One thing I try to insist a lot of is before you use force, right? And using force is usually the go-to solution, especially for boys and men, right? We just force it out. First, try to figure it out. First, try to find the right technique. First, try to figure out how is it that this is supposed to work before I apply force into something that I may end up breaking. So one of the things I tell them all the time is make sure that when you apply more force, that you're not going to break it. And if you're breaking it, that you're okay with breaking it, right? Make absolutely damn sure that you're not just muscling through something that you will regret later. First, try to figure out how it works and then apply force, knowing what it's supposed to do, knowing how it's supposed to work, right? If I know that applying force in this way has a certain mechanism going on, okay, then I will apply force knowing what I should expect. If I have no clue, maybe I want to be a little bit more careful, right? So eventually the hose plastic thingy went and so on, and then we had to cut down this pine, right? Cutting down the pine was simple enough. I used one of my trusty tools. This is a Stanley Fatmax. This is probably something, yes, I've seen these all the time. But for me, growing up, we didn't have very high quality tools, which is kind of weird because my grandparents on both my sides, from my mother and from my father, both of them were carpenters. Actually, one of them had a big shop and was quite successful at it. And as he grew older, he moved to a smaller place, and he had a toolbox that, as I explained in the previous video, was maybe half the size of that. But there he had hammer, set of screwdrivers, a nice carpenter saw, a couple chisels, and little else. One of those hand drills, right? But with those tools, he could do a lot because he did have the skill. It's not always about the tool. It's usually more about how skillful you are, how clever you are, how you figure things out. But at times it is about the tool. And growing up, we didn't have a nice saw. And one of the first things I bought when I started putting my tools together, I'm going to buy a nice saw. And this is Stanley, but this is actually made in France. So it's a quality made tool. It's not some crap from China. And it just shows. It just cuts like a freaking laser. I take a lot of care of this thing because I love it. I love this saw. I don't know what model it is. It's one of these Stanley Fatmax things. But man, over the years, I take a lot of, I still have it in like the paper, like the cardboard packaging that it came in, because I just like how well it cuts. So for the tree, in less than a minute, cutting through that pretty decent, it's not big, but a decent little size tree there. Less than a minute, just a few seconds, cutting through it, no problem whatsoever. Quality tools do make things easier. That's always a lesson, right? And that's something I try to pass along to my kids. Get good stuff. Take care of your tools. If you take care of your tools will take care of you. Sometimes you can get by with with a cheaper tool. For this plier, right? This is okay. This is not terrible. It's okay. It's not a Knipex, right? Knipex, much better, much nicer. Knipex, in their website, they explain the difference between the Cobras, which are these ones. There's a Cobra from Knipex, which is more finely, right, tuned, exactly. These are great. But even in their website, they explain that the alligators, those ones, this is not Knipex, but this system it's what they call alligator, right? The alligators ones are better for exterior work because it has less like small parts here, well, maybe not, but like dirt and grit and rust and whatever and mud is less likely to get in. Right here is more likely to get in there and cause problems. So this is more of an indoor clean situation kind of plier. This is more of a dirty situation, and once you are done using it, it is a lot easier to clean up and not have rust or grit or dirt or sand get in the way and complicate things. But this one is cheap. This one is super affordable. That's maybe a little bit more pricey. So quality tools are nice. I try to have them, but there's also often the case that a more affordable one, if it's built okay, may just be fine. One of the other things, and it may be the case that something that is more expensive is not always better. For example, this Gorilla Bar, right? Gorilla Bar, great, nice, a little bit more pricey, but man, these are nice pry bars. Gorilla, nice stuff. That one from Home Base was like a quarter of the price, and yet that is probably better because it is just as large, maybe a little bit longer, just as long, maybe a little bit longer, but it's quite a bit thinner, and thinner makes it lighter, and lighter is usually better for when you're working with that pry bar, right? You don't want a damn heavy pry bar. The Gorilla ones are nicer on this smaller format, actually. So it's not always the case. One of the other things that growing up was not something they insisted a whole lot in my household was safety. And that's something I try to insist quite a bit on. Use gloves, use glasses, use safety glasses. If you're, for example, I had to weld a little toy, well, maybe not so little, one of these quads, an electric quad that my youngest son uses. Just basically a toy, but the direction is steel, right? So steel, and it came undone. It was welded, it was spot welded, and it was a poor weld and it broke. That's the sort of thing that you only fix by welding. So I do have a small welder, brought it out, and then just a little bit of arc weld, just a little fix the thing. But when you're welding, you have to wear the welding gloves. You have to wear the welding helmet with the eye protection. And you have to use proper shoes as well. So whenever you do that, even if it's just for a couple seconds, it is important that your kids see you do things right. You don't have to be a genius. You don't have to be a master welder. No, but doing things right. That's one of the things I noticed from professionals is serious professionals do things right. Serious professionals do use safety equipment. Usually the more serious people are, the less likely they are to mess up with those things and become complacent with those things. Even whenever you're using power tools, and again, this is not what I do. This is not my line of work. But if I'm using one of the more powerful angle grinder, I will get all of the safety stuff on because I know how important it is. And that is something you need to teach your kids to do as well. So learning how to figure things out, learning how to work with their hands, learning how to get things done. It is this risky thing of, my time is not worth that. I can, an hour of my time is better invested in doing something that I know is going to be more financially better rewarded, right? But that's also very dangerous, because once you start doing that, it's often the case that anything you do is sort of okay, and pretty much you won't do anything else. You won't do any hand task or labor or changing anything, because it's always going to be cheaper and more efficient to just pay a guy to do it. And sometimes that's the right thing to do. I do that often enough myself. If I need something done and especially if it's something that involves any risk, like fixing stuff in a roof, or that is something I won't even think twice. But then it's also the case that even if it maybe takes more time, and you would be that would be time better spent doing something that's more financially sensible, but you have other advantages, like this being a good learning opportunity for your kids to learn how to do stuff. Maybe instead of paying one of the guys that you see around the neighborhood, a few bucks, go get rid of that tree stump. No, your kids are the ones that have to go and do that. And that's when they learn stuff, right? And you tell them, well, that thing needs to go. So start digging. You give them a shovel and they start working. And then when it gets very close to the roots of said tree, they start doing things like using something like this, and they break it, because this is intended for my wife to plant a little flower, right? Not dig a fucking root out of the ground, and they break it. And that's great. My wife was like, oh, look what, and I was, yes, that's exactly. Once you start breaking shit, you start understanding how things work, right? So let them break stuff, right? Let them make the mistakes. That's the point in which you start learning. Of course, you're like always kind of, look, you don't want to get too close. You want to let them do stuff, but at the same time, you don't want to see them get hurt. So, right? And then they ask for, hey, don't you have like what? Yes, I do have one of those shovels, and it's not in the like in the video where we're using for chopping, using it for digging. Yes, the special forces shovel. No, this is actually needed to be used to chop, cut, and dig around the damn roots of the tree, and it is hard work. But hey, there you go and do it. Figure things out. The Glock has and yes, this is not the knife, but the knife that we had yesterday, but this saw is actually called a root saw. In Glock's website, they say that this knife has a root saw. It's intended for cutting roots, right? So yeah, those things are how they're supposed to be used. And even for ourselves, doing things that are a little bit more labor intense, physically intense. It's not just like lifting weights and using kettlebells and no. These things involve another group of different muscles that you probably don't use a whole lot. Things regarding dexterity that you probably don't do a whole lot. It even stimulates your brain and your nervous systems in ways that you are not used to. So anything that you do that is a little bit more of hand labor, dexterity, using a little bit of force, trying to figure things out, prying and breaking and chopping and doing all of these things, even for yourself. It's not just about teaching your kids. Even for yourself can be something that adds a lot more value than you realize. It's not about saving money. It's about doing things that your body was intended for. You were supposed to be doing all of this. You were supposed to do manual and physical work. And whenever the opportunity is, maybe give it a shot. Go try doing it and using that as a teaching opportunity for your kids as well. That's also something you may want to keep in mind. Guys, that's going to be all for now. See you in the next video. Take care.